everybody, it's Kayla Halter. Just another day in the field, scouting corn and looking at emergence. But I wanted to show you a few things today and what to look for when we're looking at compaction and issues you can have later on. So if you look around this field, it looks awful cloudy where we're standing right now, and I'm on the edge of the field to stay in the shade because I couldn't get a good video out in the field. But there's several wet spots, like one over here. Well, there's not much corn grown up, and you can see the tire tracks, they sunk in about 2 feet, but it looks like the field may have been a little on the wet side when it got worked, and then it got planted just a tad too wet. This field was actually planted Memorial Weekend, trying to beat the rain on Monday, Memorial Day. So I dug up a few plants because I saw some issues going on. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. So this is the first plant I dug up. And you can see it's growing at a really weird angle when it was coming up. And there's not very many roots on it. It's stuck in this dirt clod, but essentially there's nothing there. There you can see a little bit better. And here is when I started digging what come up first. This whole entire clod came up, and if I turn it to the side you can see how straight this face is right here on front, and it's really smooth. So that's an indicator that it was planted too wet. When those disc openers came through, it sheared the side of this soil and just made a real smooth plane right there, and that is what we call sidewall compaction. So as your plant is trying to grow up right along here, it's smooth and so tight that nothing is going to be able to penetrate this sidewall. So there was compaction there. We also had compaction in the root zone, so I mentioned that it was probably worked a little bit too wet, and I could tell by looking at it that this compaction layer was right underneath where the roots were trying to grow. So about 2 to 3 inches deep, that's where the farmer was working the ground. He's just trying to work that root zone, the top part of the field. So whenever this seedling germinates, the first roots it puts out right here is its radical root. And it will live off of the starches that are in the seed in that radical root for the first few weeks until it gets to about V2 to V3, and then it will switch and start feeding off of the crown roots that come off of your crown right here. You can tell there's a little swollen band that goes across there, and that'll be where our first set of brace roots come out. And I dug a healthy plant too just to compare. So if you compare these two right here, this plant has a very healthy radical root coming out, starting to put out seminal roots coming off a couple different sides. Not quite big enough to have its first set of crown roots, but you can definitely tell this plant is going to have issues later on in life. There's not enough of a root system there to hold the plant up. If we get into any kind of dry weather, this small root system is not going to be able to take up enough water and nutrients to sustain this plant, so more than likely it's going to die later on. Reason being, we have this sidewall compaction on the side of the plant so the roots can't grow out sideways, and then we also had compaction right underneath the seed so it couldn't go down. Another indicator of compaction, if you look at this seed, it didn't grow straight up like this mesocotyl did. And mesocotyl is the tissue that comes out of the seed and grows up to the crown right here, that swollen part, and then pushes through the soil with the coleoptile. The coleoptile is this slightly whitish tissue right here, and all that it's really hard, and it encases those leaves and helps penetrate and push through the soil surface, and then the leaves emerge out of that. You can see it a little better over here on this side where the coleoptile split open, but this mesocotyl is not growing straight. It came out of the seed, looped around, took a hard 90-degree turn, and then took another 90 degrees straight up. So this is another indicator of compaction, because a seed will always follow the path of least resistance. So we hit some compaction right here, and it started growing sideways because that's the only spot it could find that was soft enough to go through, and then it hit another tough spot right here and started growing straight up. So just a few things to look at, and compaction will later on start to impede water infiltration and nutrient uptake, so we'll have to keep an eye on this field in certain areas. The whole field doesn't look like this, but there are pockets where we could start to see plants fall over later on because they don't have a root system. If it starts to get dry, we're definitely going to see water stress, the lack of water, a lot sooner in these areas that don't have a good root system. And if we end up in a drought, good possibility every year that we could have that happen. We could see some yield loss just because plants like this are not going to be able to penetrate and get down deep enough to get water once we start getting into a dry season.